Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by voiceover artists, we make your life sound more exciting than it is. Now let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Axe Global. A step ahead of other investors, take your cut with Axe Global. Welcome everyone to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We like to discuss and analyze film from that perspective as people who know about writing and directing and some cinematography and some acting and some of this and some of that. It's fun to use all of that and to see how much further we have to go when we watch other great artists at work. It's always fun, even if, the movie doesn't end up being our favorite. There's just so much expertise and there's so much to learn from every project. Yeah. And it's a process, man. Learning it as a writer, I'm constantly, learning, I think, in ways that you don't always anticipate. So my grandmother, of course, passed away this past week and a half. And so that was a strange time. Obviously it hurts, it's painful. And so if I get scatterbrained over the next few weeks, forgive me. But losing my grandmother was different from losing anyone else. Not just because she's literally in my very first memory, but I have a mother and she lost her mom. And so being there for my mom was really different because for the several days, I couldn't really even grieve.
Oh.
Because the last thing you want is to suddenly feel like your mom has to take care of you when she's trying to grieve herself. And so it's all about, trying to be strong, hold it together, and let her have a moment to fall apart. And that's why I've never really understood when people say you got to be strong for your family. I honestly just never understood. I thought that was kind of a red herring to get away from how you actually want to grieve. And that's like but it is actually a thing, as it turns out, Todd. People aren't making everything up, I guess.
That's such a great point. Like, wow, I actually never thought of that. Yes, your mom lost her mother, which, it's, you have to grieve. Like you're going through a loss, but she arguably is going through a bigger loss, right? This woman has been in her life for her whole life, obviously. Wow. Amazing.
It was something I had never considered. And it's not my first grandparent. When I was younger, I lost my grandfather whenever on my biological father's side. I didn't know that side of my family quite as well. I spent some amazing summers with them. But otherwise, every single holiday, it's this other side of my family, my mother's side. And so whenever I lost my, I forget what you call that, paternal grandparents, it wasn't quite as stunning for me because it was only periodic when I saw them in the first place, as opposed to being every single holiday, every single birthday celebration, whatever. Like grandma and my grandfather are both there. And so that was just a very, strange realization to be like, oh, I kind of need to I need to make sure I'm aware and, not falling apart just for all those reasons. And then as you move along in the process, you find your space to grieve. And it was a humbling experience, but it was also just one of those things as a writer and as an actor. I try to always be aware of when I'm experiencing something. Like I was kind of going through some of this, telling my producer some of this when we were catching up a few days ago. And then he and I, got into a disagreement, and I'm very aware physically of what was going on in my body, even as I'm having an argument. It's like my breath shortened and, little tremble. I was restless. I couldn't sit still. I needed to close my laptop, even though my laptop did nothing to me. Like I was just, what are all these things that I'm doing, even as I'm doing them, even as I'm frustrated and wrestling with the conversation at hand. I was also just hyper aware of everything happening within my body, so that as an actor, I can be aware of those things. Even as a director, if I want to give an actor like some more juice, like, hey, why don't you try this? Close your laptop, or put away your phone, pull out your phone, then put it away again. Like you're just restless energy, right? And give them ideas. Like just being aware and experiencing yourself as you're experiencing life is good. It's a useful thing, even as it feels a little perverse, like almost like you're cribbing notes off of tragedy or grief.
Yeah,
It's a weird. So it's really cool that we're, I don't know, going through Charlie Kaufman today, because he is very much that kind of guy. Like it's hard to not watch Adaptation and understand him as a screenwriter thinking about screenwriting, and then inserting all of that and just layers and layers into the film itself. Him describing the film as he's making the film is just really hilarious. And also just true to form for a lot of artists. Like I can only imagine the number of times that you've thought about making something while going through something, just as a coping mechanism, or just because you're feeling the inspiration or the energy that you can't dissipate. And it's like just a way to dissipate energy, build up and all that. Yeah. And it's weird because everything now is just weird for me. Like laughing feels wrong. It's like, whoa, do you get to laugh? Well, yeah, of course you get to laugh.
Yeah. But how long after are you allowed to laugh? Same day? Next day? In a week? What if something accidentally makes you laugh?
Yeah. When is it okay? Right.
What if something accidentally makes you laugh like 5 minutes later? Like, do you feel guilty? Is it? Yeah.
And then do you feel guilty for feeling guilty? Like as if you expect life to stop going forward, like other people's joy shouldn't be there. Yeah. It's
well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have a song that's about my father dying. He hasn't died. But what it would be like if he did. And in it, I talk about how, I want the world to stop.
Mm.
Like everything needs to stop, because this is very important, and the entire world needs to know this kind of thing. I think that's kind of the feeling of like, okay, if I know that every, it's supposed to be, you have all these steps you go through when you grieve. Well, one of those steps is actual sadness, right? And it's not, I probably would feel like it's not fair, but it's not okay for the world to be happy and moving forward, while this thing has happened to this person that I love, right? Like this, nobody knows how important this is except for me. And that's not okay. The world needs to take a second. And I think maybe that's like a part of it too. I mean, I know that had to be really hard losing your grandmother, but I'm proud of you for going and being there with and for your family, for your mother. Let's just say for your mother, more than anybody, and for yourself, right? And it had to be incredibly hard to also put your own feelings and emotions on the back burner, at least for a while,
Yeah, it was funny.
Her.
She taught me how to make salsa like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And so I was struggling.
You made it for me.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. It's always a shadow. Like no one can ever, she literally gave me all the directions, walked me into her kitchen, showed me how to do it step by step. And I still, you can't reproduce that magic. And so I was struggling for several days. And then like I got the phone call Wednesday morning, and Saturday I decided I'm going to make some salsa and commune with my grandmother. And I was, almost done. I, took a sample bite, and I was like, it'd be funny if this is when I decided to have a breakdown. And then I just collapsed. I was like,
oh,
yeah.
Oh God. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. So what are we doing today?
Yeah, no, we're adapting. That's what we're doing today, man.
Yeah, I don't want to be flippant about it.
No, not at all. Like at the end of the day, it's processing, it's moving on, and I don't know, talking about film, moving on. I don't know. It's me.
I think maybe I could just say this, like a lot of times when I watch movies, especially movies that have um where a lot of people die and then we move to another shot, I always think about, like, I always do this. I always do almost every single movie. I mean, any Mission Impossible, whatever, some dude, random henchman gets cut in half or whatever. How many people will never see that henchman guy again? Or like, it doesn't even matter, somebody, like a building falls and like somebody, a group of people are
Yeah.
like, but then we go cut to another thing because the main character goes to another city or something like that. Like that, that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that I think about, of like, what about that one person and how many lives is that one person, that woman, how many lives has that woman touched? And it would be really interesting to see a film where you think it's going one way and something happens to a random character that has nothing to do with the story, and the story completely deviates to the repercussions of that, of the people that knew that person. Like that would
That's
be
awesome.
really
Yeah.
unique and interesting, and nobody has done that I've seen. At least maybe if there's some film that you've seen that's done that, let me know, because I want to immediately go watch it. But that's the kind of stuff that I think about, and I know someone like your grandmother, obviously she's touched your life and changed your life, and thousands of other people,
Yeah, no, that would be funny, man. It's like you're watching Heat and you're watching De Niro and Pacino, tee off on each other, and then suddenly, there's a shootout and, some random cop gets shot, and then, we're cutting to his family getting the news, and we just leave all of that. And it's just the rest of
that's
the
the
film.
last we see of De Niro. Like he's gone, he's in like the first third of the movie, but that's it.
You catch like new segments about what happened, and that's your, finishing of that whole storyline, but the rest is just sitting with the family and like, yeah, he loved, helping people, and he was a great cop. And it's just
I mean, I think like maybe a good version of that would be something like Crash or something where it's not this, that's its own thing, but like,
I think the closest I've seen is something like A Place Beyond the Pines.
Okay.
Where
yeah.
It kind of has that, but it's all very connected.
Is that the Gosling film?
Yeah, this is Gosling and Bradley. What's his name?
Cooper.
Yeah, that one. Rocket. I don't know, the guy that plays Rocket.
Rocket. The Rocket's in that one.
Rocket. Yeah. But no, all good, man. Like, I just felt like I learned a lot of interesting things, and I don't know. I try not to hide too much, even though I certainly keep a lot to myself, but we're always learning, we're always growing, and that's okay. Yeah,
and it's totally okay to be emotional, and I mean, anybody would
hopefully, if you are not an animal and you love your grandparents.
When my last grandmother passed, I was with her, and then I left to go back to Austin, and I literally pulled into my apartment complex and I got the call.
Wow.
Yeah. I was with her in Houston, and then I was like, I was there for days and I had to go back to work. Like and they thought she was coming back. They thought she was going to be all right. And anyway, I'm really sorry you had to deal with that. We, took a little bit of time off. And we might take some more, who knows, but it is good to be back, seeing you and talking to you about films and giving me an excuse to watch films, and talking about this stuff that we love, man.
Nice. And what are we talking about today, man?
Yeah. Today we are covering Andy Kaufman's Adaptation. So if you haven't seen this film, please pause this episode and go watch it, because we're going to spoil a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, we'll touch on some of the cinematography, but we'll also dive into the story and writing, subplots versus settings, as well as Charlie's twin. And then at the very end, stay tuned, because we'll be listening to a new track from Mad Valley. This one's called Come Back Down. Quite excited about that, sir. And other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film: a lovelorn screenwriter becomes desperate as he tries and fails to adapt a book into a movie. Directed by Spike Jonze, screenplay by Charlie Kaufman, cinematography by Lance Acord. It's featuring Nicolas Cage as Charlie and Donald Kaufman, Meryl Streep as Susan Orlean, Chris Cooper as Laroche, Tilda Swinton as Valerie, and Cara Seymour as Amelia.
My leg hurts. I wonder if it's cancer. There's a bump. I'm starting to sweat. Stop sweating. I've got to stop sweating. Can she see it dripping down my forehead? Oh, she looked at my hairline. She thinks I'm bald.
We think you're great.
Oh, wow. Thanks. That's nice to hear.
We all just loved the Malkovich script.
Thanks.
Such a unique voice. Boy, I'd love to find a portal into your brain.
Trust me, it's no fun.
So, tell me your thoughts on this crazy little project of ours.
First, I think it's a great book.
Laroche is a fun character, isn't he?
Absolutely. And Orlean makes orchids so fascinating. Plus her musings on Florida and orchid poaching, Indians. It's great, sprawling New Yorker stuff. And I'd want to remain true to that. You know, I'd want to let the movie exist rather than be artificially plot-driven.
Great. I guess I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Oh. I'm not sure I know what that means either. You know, I just don't want to ruin it by making it a Hollywood thing, you know, like an orchid heist movie or something, you know, or you know, changing the orchids into poppies and turning it into a movie about drug running, you know? Why can't there be a movie simply about flowers?
I guess we thought that maybe Susan, Orlean, and Laroche could fall in love.
Okay, but I'm saying it's like I don't want to cram in sex or guns or car chases, you know, or characters, you know, learning profound life lessons or growing or coming to like each other or overcoming obstacles to succeed in the end. You know, I mean, the book isn't like that, and life isn't like that. You know, it just isn't. And I feel very strongly about this.
So Nicolas Cage is so-so. He's okay. I mean, that whole monologue is funny. And this happens throughout the film where he basically does all the things he's saying. This is a sprawling film, so he accomplishes that goal, but it also kind of becomes a heist film and a drugs run film, and all those things that he said he didn't want to do becomes in one way or another, it touches on all of that, which is really, really funny. Yeah, you just watched this for the first time a few weeks ago, and now you're revisiting it again. What was it like sitting down to watch this 20-year-old classic?
I mean, it was to me, this was art at its finest. It was, you know, I've never, you know, I think that you can look at Nick Cage on his face and just think, oh, you know, like his movies are fun. You know, Con Air, it's fun, but it's not really like great acting. But when I watch this film, I'm just absolutely floored by just how good he is. I mean, this type of movie is just perfect for him. I don't think that he plays like stoicism very well. If he has to be super serious, and by super serious I don't mean not funny. I just mean like if he has to be very, you know, still, I don't really buy it. This whole him playing Charlie Kaufman, him being, you know, just he's always moving, he's always searching, he's always, you know, restless. That's very down his rabbit hole of ability, and I think he just destroys this role. It's absolutely perfect. It makes me feel like I'm looking into the mind of an actual distraught writer who's looking desperately for a way to not only like make something that nobody's ever made before, but just make something in general, just like period, you know, I just want to write a freaking page.
And what a turn that it takes, because that's where he starts, right? It's like, I need to make something inspired and brand new that no one's ever done. And by the end, right, he's like, let me make anything.
Anything at all. That's the whole point. And then it's a real, like turning point for him. And I love that scene where he goes to the he goes to the speech, right? Of what's his name? I forget. Yeah. And he he asks that question, and he just gets torn apart, and he goes, "Okay, thank you very much." And he just sits down. It's so fantastic because any other movie or any, like, maybe that would have been it, and he would have just left, right? But no, he waits. He waits after. It's out of character of him, I think, too, of his character. He like waits outside for him to the speaker to come out, and then he confronts him and says, can we get a drink, or like whatever, can we talk, can I talk to you? Da-da-da. He goes for more. He was just torn up completely by this guy, and yet he goes back for more. And it does so many things for me. It makes me question, like, what am I doing? Because this guy who's completely, he's just a lost cause, throws himself head first into the lion's den and goes back to this guy who just destroyed him for guidance. How ballsy is that? This is a guy who, like, doesn't want to leave his apartment. He can't write a single word on a page. He's like, like, he can't kiss a girl. Like, he cannot do anything like that at all that he's supposed to do. He's a complete mess. And yet here he is in a different city. I guess he was in New York at this time, in a different city, this guy he's never met who just tore him apart, and he's going back to ask him more questions for more guidance when the guy says the opposite of what he just said in the clip that you played. He's like, why are you going to waste my effing time? I've got things to do. Why are you going to waste my time with no plot or anything like that? And it just is mind blowing. And that's just one little moment of this. I mean, the idea of him having a twin brother is just brilliant. A brilliant little, who just kind of falls into success, right? And he's very charismatic, and he's out there, and kudos to Cage for being able to play both roles so perfectly. And his brother comes to New York, to help him out, and he's in the same room with himself, playing with himself, and playing one guy who's charismatic and just throwing out ideas all over the place, and then also a guy who's very reserved, like, oh, we can't do that because da, 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 and it's mind-boggling, the writing in this film to me. It's poetic, it's artistic, it's such an incredible screenplay, it just in general. And then to see it come alive, what's his name? Cooper.
Chris Cooper. Oh my God.
I mean,
I didn't realize it was him for several scenes.
Yeah, me either. But I mean, and they do such a. I think that what's directed it?
Spike Jonze.
Spike Jonze. I'm so bad with names. Spike Jonze did such an incredible job of making us also, to a point. I don't think I ever like actually fell in love with him. But I was in some moments endeared by his love for what he did, which I think that she was too. I think that Susan, that's kind of like what got her too, was just John's love for what he does and his just all encompassing drive for what he did, because she feels the same, with her writing, and they had this connection. And I felt that at times throughout. And then obviously, he would say something stupid or whatever, and I'd be like, oh yeah, no, he's a total freaking loser, and this is ridiculous. What am I doing? But that's a brilliant, it shows the brilliance of Spike's direction, I would say. And I just absolutely love Kaufman and almost all of his writing. I mean, Eternal Sunshine, one of my favorites, and I think one of
Yeah,
yours too.
absolutely.
You know, being John Malkovich, like it just there's a pretty good list of stuff that's really insightful, new, intriguing, but also just like this is just a story where it's life imitating art, imitating life, imitating art, imitating life, and how inception-y that gets is the uniqueness of it, I would say.
Dude, that's so awesome. Yeah, everything about this film, like I watched it not in theaters, but after it came out on like DVD, and it was just one of those. I think someone might have recommended it, and I was like, yeah, okay. And so I just sitting and watching it with my brother, and I haven't seen it since, but it is such a strong, unique story that I remembered a really good chunk of all this. Again, 20 years later, and I can still like, oh yeah, that clip with McKee is like just as fresh, as it was when I watched it the first time. And knowing, I think, a little about screenwriting watching this was really, really funny to me. I mean, I was in my very early 20s, and I was, 2021, and watching it, I was just cracking up without fully understanding everything that he's wrestling with. And of course, now as a screenwriter, like I can really appreciate, a lot of these conversations. But I think what works so well for this is you don't have to be a screenwriter to immediately understand the dynamic that's at play between him and his brother. Whenever you see someone being super artistic, and then you hear someone else like just on a whim deciding, you know what, I figured out what I'm going to do. He's like, you're going to have to pay me back. No, I am going to pay you back. I'm going to be a screenwriter. And we all kind of instinctively know this is a very hard thing to get into. Getting into, the film industry at all and making, a break in, really, really tough. And hearing someone be so flippant about it, and make it sound just so simple, like, yeah, I'm just going to be a famous billionaire. Like, okay, well, good luck, and then start to just kind of go paint by the numbers, is just so aggravating to someone who we've already been talking to and listening to how he thinks. And so the setup is really good because we've already spent in the opening credits some time inside his insecurity and his mind. And then we're meeting him for the first time, talking with, some agent that has optioned a book to turn into, a screenplay. And now he's pitching himself, but he's doing it with integrity. And the integrity comes through when he says all the things I hate about Hollywood that immediately his brother says that he likes in the very next scene. Like, that's all the things I want to do. So he does a really good job of anyone can watch this movie and easily understand the conflict that he has. And of course, that's really important because he's trying to make a film without conflict. Like, that's what he's doing in the story, is adapting this book without any real conflict. It's just about flowers. But within the story that we're watching, there's all kinds of conflict. And so we, of course, begin to understand as he walks through this whole process that this is a story that he was getting to as he was trying to wrestle through all these problems. And so, yeah, there is this inception-y kind of thing going on, where you're looking into a mirror that is reflecting another mirror on the other side. And it's just this infinite hallway of views. And it's a little disorienting at times. And that's what makes it so fun, is that he managed to thread the needle in a way that it's a little disorienting without ever actually fully disorienting you. So even at the end, whenever he's driving off, and he's like, I know exactly how I'm going to end the book. It's going to end with him knowing how to end the book. And then he's going to sit at his typewriter and he's going to say, and then he understood how to end the book. So you've got like 3 or 4 layers of him having this realization, and looking down on it as he drives off into the sunset. It's just really smart, but it's smart in and of itself, but also because of how well he's able to pull any audience member along for the ride. It would be a lot easier to write this thing if you weren't that concerned with making sure it's accessible to people who don't understand all the things that he's talking about already, but instead walk in completely blind and then get brought up to speed and then get on the inside of all the jokes instead of feeling like the butt. Because everyone, I mean, half the audience, loves all the things that he hates. Every movie he's talking about that discuss him are movies that do really well. And guess what? We all watch those movies and we all like those movies. We don't want to feel like he's making fun of us. Instead, you want them to feel like, yes, we like art and these other things are silly, even though we all secretly, appreciate that. But within the context of the story, being able to get on his side instead of being in opposition of him is really clever. And it's very swift. And part of it is done, of course, through his character building of Charlie himself, making him this not dumb, but insecure, fat, balding guy who can't kiss the girl. Like, you just make him so sympathetic that, you're rooting for him to just get out of his own way, even as you're frustrated with him at points, like the kiss in the car. Man,
I mean, it like makes you, it puts the screenwriter in the forefront of the importance of a film. So many movies, you don't even think about the screenplay. It just is the story. And that's what makes a screenplay great, right?
Absolutely.
This flips that completely. And it is the story. The screenplay is the story. And you have no idea where it's going because it's being written while you're watching it. So everything that happens is surprising.
It is. And then it's such a tricky rope to walk, though, because once you start alerting the audience of the screenwriter, you're basically inviting them to also think about what you're presenting to them. And so when you start wrapping things up, it needs to be ahead of the audience. It needs to make sure that as the audience is thinking about what you're telling them and informing them about screenwriting, that you're also not giving them an excuse to judge you and eject from the story. Like, that's such a tricky, to write all of that and balance it and, carry it out. Like, wow.
Hence, that's a great point. Hence, in the third act, when he and his Charlie and his brother go to Florida, right? He's not actively writing at that point. They're just experiencing life, and we're watching them experience the life. So we're not judging the writing. It's just their life experience. And then after that craziness happens, then he finishes the screen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we experience all of it during, but then when you get to the third act, we're not experiencing the writing. We're experiencing life and real life scenarios and stuff. We're not like flashing to Susan and John and flashing back to Charlie. We're not doing any of that anymore. They're together now. And so there is just life. There is no writing.
That's a great point. Choosing when and where to use those voiceovers for his thoughts is really delicate, because if you do it at the wrong time, then you are inviting, a little bit of picking apart instead of just existing, because there's moments when he's not in his head, even though he is with all his insecurities, but he's finding a way to screw up his life. And those are the moments that he's out of his head. And yeah, it's really tangled, and it's a lot of finesse going into this. And I would never dance on these grounds. Like,
I mean, it just requires top level from literally everyone. From this, I think that Kaufman working together with
Spike Jonze, the director.
Thank you. Okay, I had it right. Spike. Kaufman working with Spike Jonze is just magic. They have to be on the same page throughout every single scene, every shot, every angle, every point of view, because then it's going to get into the edit. And it's not just them, it's also the acting has got to be just on point. But really, if those two guys are linked at the hip, mentally, because it's one thing to be a director. It's another thing to be a director for a Charlie Kaufman film, right? You kind of have to get it well before you make it. Like, while you're reading it, you have to be able to see it. I feel like I don't feel like something like this could be explained like Charlie could sit down with Spike and just be like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. No, I think that Spike would need to be able to sit down with Charlie and say, this is what I see when I read your screenplay. And Charlie would be like, yeah, that's it. They just have to all automatically be on the same plane, because how do you explain this and then do it and then get it into an edit and it works? I just don't know.
I don't. I love all the conversation throughout it though, because it's as he's wrestling with it, we're seeing so many things that he's not addressing. At least I don't think. But like Susan as a character is really interesting. It feels like he's commenting about writers, or at least judging writers, and by doing so, judging himself. It doesn't feel like a way to just talk, crap about his peers, but as a way to lift up everyone else by kind of in a soft, kind of subtle way, put writers down. And by that, I just mean Susan becomes infatuated. It's very much what you were talking about Laroche, and being, fascinated by his just joy and love and passion for orchids and plants, and just being a really vivacious person, right? He's just very alive and into everything that he's doing, and he does not care if you're not into it. He might yell at you, but that's not necessarily just because you're not into it. I don't know. He's just his own mercurial kind of personality, and it's fascinating. And I think what's interesting to me is Susan is fascinated by him because she doesn't have any of that herself, right? That's her conversation with herself, is how much she wish she loved anything as much as this guy loves a flower. And she's hoping to catch some of that. And then when she finally sees the flower, she's like, it's just a flower. Like, she's disappointed. And of course, he doesn't know what she's on about. He's just like a little let down that she's let down, but she's let down that she didn't experience this thing that he's been experiencing whenever he gets these moments. And if the most rare flower in whatever America or the world, whatever, like, isn't going to do it for her, then none of that's going to do it for her. And of course, that's eventually what levels up her relationship with Laroche. But it's that emptiness, like. And I think the commentary to me is that she's writing about other people because she doesn't have anything in herself to write about. Like, there's a hollowness there that she's trying to fill up with other people's stories, with other people's lives and passions, instead of, going out and living her own passion, living her own life. Now, I don't think most writers would see the world that way, but I think it's a very interesting take on that character, and maybe just as a motivation for some writers or writers in general. I don't really care. It's fun and layered in its own way. Yeah, I love that. Cinematography, I just want to dive a little bit into cinematography just so that I can look at some of the story and writing, because there's more writing stuff that I think is really cool. Cinematography wise, Charlie, it just pops out to me that whenever he's in that seminar and we get that really wide shot of him sitting in the middle right before he asks this question, it's such a good shot because he pops out of the crowd so strongly. And that's tricky. I think one of the things they're doing is some vignetting with the light that kind of, makes sure that the edges of the frame kind of have a natural tint to it. It felt like that was in camera. That didn't feel like a post effect. It felt like the lighting itself was vignetted in the scene. But then everyone around him is in solids. Like, a lot of people are wearing black. And if they're not wearing black, they're just wearing a solid. And then he, of course, is in plaid, most brightly lit in the room, but also in plaid. And it's just making a lot of great contrast in order to make him the focal point, so that when we cut to that shot, our eye might wander for a half second before we land on him, because that's where everything is pointing to. And it's hard to do in a really wide shot like that in a crowd of faces, to pick out one single face. Really well directed and, choreographed with everyone, his whole team. That's, the cinematographer, as well as your wardrobe and costume department. Like, that's very, very finessed moment there. The other little lighting moment I love is whenever he goes into his room, Charlie goes into his room and sees, you know, what his brother left him, the rules, the screenwriting principles or commandments. And he like starts to read it and then just pulls it down, wads it up, turns around. There's his brother. And his brother says, "You shouldn't have done that." And it's kind of creepy. And then he laughs. He's like, "No, it's fine. Just kidding." And what I love about it is the lighting there is this uplighting, and they're giving him this kind of monster campfire lighting, right? That's just a little scary and horrific because it's not how we're used to seeing lighting. It's fun. It's just a little fun, villainous, you know, visual punch for the humor of the moment. The other thing I really love, and this is kind of a combination of cinematography and editing, and directing, of course. Everything is a directing thing as far as I'm concerned. But the reaction shot of when they are at the end of that date with Amelia, Charlie is debating, like, you know, internally what's going to happen. And they're just having this great conversation. And he's giving her this beautiful compliment about, "I love your music. It's so beautiful." She's like, "Thank you, Charlie." And he's a little moment. And then he goes and starts talking about like, "Well, I would hang out, but I need to go and work on my script. It's just not going well right now. Otherwise I would stay out longer." And I love that while we're listening to him talk, we're watching the reaction shot of Amelia, because after that we can 100% see that she does not care about the script in that moment. Like in general, she cares about what's going on in his life, but in that moment, 100% she doesn't care about his screenplay. She is just completely hearing rejection, and it's written all over her face. And she's not doing a lot, but it's so subtle, and the context is there to provide the emotional element, but she is doing something. And I think for me, she's not doing too much. She's doing just enough so that you feel like she's not trying to let on to him what she's actually feeling, but we know because we felt the moment and we felt it slip away. And all she has to do is play it honestly and as completely honest as a human would in that moment, and we'll get it. We're really emotionally intelligent creatures, and in the right circumstances. And so I love that shot of just watching her kind of slightly internally fall apart and fall to pieces. And then from there, you know, he lost her. She's gone. He's like, "I've got this thing coming up." And it's like, "Oh, I can't make that, Charlie." She's done. And you know it as soon as she walks away. I'll come back to that moment in a little bit. Story and writing wise, there's one thing, there's kind of an interesting before and after, or a rule of repeats that happens in the film, which is whenever that first time Laroche goes scouting with his friends to grab some flowers and plants from the preserve, and they get back to the truck, there's so much fun tension when the ranger pulls up on Laroche, because these are some seedy looking dudes sneaking around. This guy's missing half his teeth. And so the confrontation of the ranger, it feels like we're just waiting to see what they do. And we're assuming violence. Like, this guy's way too calm for getting busted. And so we're just waiting for like a gun to pull out and just waste this guy. But instead, it's a really fun twist that instead they're just very clever and well studied. And it's like, well, okay, I didn't expect that. His wits to get him out of the jam. And then at the end of the film, when Charlie gets caught spying on Laroche and Susan, her reaction is completely different from what Laroche's was with the ranger, because her reaction is to kill him. And it's just a beautiful contrast of who she is and how she thinks of her life and society, right? Laroche wasn't worried about going in front of the public and like, this is who I am. He's proud of who he is. And that's okay if it means other people drag him in front of a court. She's really got nothing to worry about. Like, the most that's going to happen is her reputation is ruined. But for her, that is death. And so there's no way, she can possibly be held accountable. And it makes emotional sense. Like, if you step out and say, if this woman would just like chill out, it's probably nothing bad's going to happen. Instead, she goes the complete opposite direction. It was like, no, we need to murder someone.
Yeah. But then Laroche, he goes along with it, you know, like she's it's almost like she's brought him down to her level. She's given him, either she's given him or he's taken on her insecurities, that she's always had, that you pointed out earlier. She's these insecurities she can't write about herself, so she's got to write about somebody else. She's looking outward for stories, and he becomes that. But then when he gets into bed with her, literally, I guess, it bastardizes who he is.
Wow.
And then that manifests in him agreeing to kill Charlie at the end. Because he's like, what? No. When she says we got to kill him, he's like, what are you talking about? No. And then really quickly, he just flips. She makes him flip.
Yeah. Oof.
So she has this power over him now that she didn't at the beginning. Nobody had power over him. To your point at the beginning,
right.
talking to the ranger there, he's like unafraid at all. Unconcerned at all. By the way, here's all the information as to why you need to step off, bro. And it's brilliant. It's such a good way to establish his, let's call it dominance, right?
Yeah.
Where he just does what he wants and he gets away with it because he's smart and knows what he needs to know.
100%.
Yeah.
There's a lot of threads in this film, and that basically means there's a lot of subplots. And subplots and settings are different because a lot of the subplots, we have Charlie adapting the novel, Donald writing his thriller, Laroche, his legal issues, Susan and Laroche getting together, Charlie and Amelia, Charlie and dating in general, not going well. And the difference though, because, there's also some settings that happen that feel like they could be a subplot, even though they're not. We're constantly visiting the set of Being John Malkovich, and that's not a plot in this movie. It's just a setting to let other plots develop. And obviously that's fine. But the difference though would be a plot has stakes. There's a consequence of failing or succeeding, right? Donald writing his thriller does have consequences. And for Charlie, neither one are really great. If Donald writes it and it's great, it kills Charlie's self-confidence, and it makes him feel like crap. But also he cares about his brother. So his brother writing it and failing doesn't make him feel better. It's kind of a lose-lose proposition, but there are very consequences. They just have different results. Like what those look like will greatly differ. And that's just a fun thing to think about. Like whenever you're working on a project and you want to know, is my plot really going anywhere? Does it mean anything? Well, what happens if someone fails or succeeds? That'll give you an idea of if there are stakes, and therefore if there's really any plot that you're wrestling with in the first place. It can't just be a sequence of events. They need to also have, some stakes and some groundedness that makes it worth rooting for or rooting against, etc. And so this is the kind of the final element here is twins. Like, I'm pretty sure Charlie Kaufman does not have a twin brother named Donald. I feel good about that. Yeah. I don't know that much about Charlie Kaufman, but I feel good about that. And what's so good about it is it's a great contrast between these two characters. And it really helps them feel like individual characters. And that's one element, or else you just have Nick Cage kind of talking to himself. And instead, if it does not take but a minute or two to feel like these are really actual people that you're watching on screen. And part of it is certainly, the contrast and how wildly different their characters are. But another part of it, of course, is the timing. They do a great job of making sure their timing works flawlessly. And so there's interruptions without cutting away and making it feel like, oh, we're just stitching this together in post. Instead, all the timing is choreographed very, very tightly. And I'd be curious to see how they did that. If it was just Nicolas Cage rehearsing 1,000 times, or if they had someone else in the room. But if you have someone else in the room doing that, you have to be very, very careful on capturing audio, because if you trample each other's lines, that's a burn take. You may not be able to use that or salvage it. And so it's very delicate. I assume it's very much Nicolas Cage working out the timing, running it in his head while also performing to the full extent each character individually. That's brutal. Or maybe there is someone else in the room and they're just doing a great job of, I'm never going to trample. And then in post, whenever we cut these two together, we'll make sure they trample so that it feels much more organic and lived in. I'm just thinking about that first moment when we're meeting his brother and he's sitting in the bed, and then the guy comes into the bedroom on his hands and knees. It's so weird. It's like, what are you doing? And Charlie is trying to talk. And then we're watching Charlie on his bed. And then we're listening and he keeps getting interrupted. He keeps trying to wait. Okay. Sorry. Oh yeah. Sorry. It's all these little false starts. It's beautiful. Just the how tight it's all kind of coming together. The other interesting thing, on a more cerebral level, is whether or not Donald is the alter ego of real Charlie. Like, Charlie Kaufman does not look anything like his character in this film. He's like this curly headed dude with all his hair. He looks kind of spry and wiry to me. I don't know. I didn't really, go through a photo album or anything, but just looking at a couple shots, I was like, he looks like a pretty average Joe. Not as scary looking as this version of Charlie Kaufman. And so what does it do to dress him up like this? What does it do to give him a twin? And I feel like it's a really fun way of Charlie Kaufman kind of saying what he wishes he were. Like this less intelligent guy, this more confident guy, this guy who's less trapped inside himself. Because he probably feels much more like that Charlie Kaufman than whatever he is in reality. And then let's generate this. What do I wish I were? Okay, we'll let this guy live and breathe. But I think the other aspect of it is this is the embodiment of his inner conflict of being commercial versus creating and writing something artistically satisfying. Because ultimately his twin with all the commercial prospects is killed in the conflict. Right. And I think that's kind of his way of saying that's not what I do. This isn't who I am. And therefore I'm erasing this guy from existence and learning to be that in my own way. Yeah. And he also, as I was mentioning earlier, he ends up doing all the things he hates. Right. Mm-hmm. But he makes them work because it's ultimately not about the concept or the technique. It's about the execution. Like, the ideas can sound terrible, but if you execute it, in the right way, any idea can be great, and any good idea can be really bad. It's always about the execution. So like voiceover, I love that he calls it out in the film that, that's a hack's tool or whatever he says, like, for God's sake, do not use voiceover. And it
while
interrupts
he's doing
him.
Voiceover.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so smart. But he does it so well here because there's a lot of ways to use voiceover, and some of them are really bad, but some of them are really good. So let's backtrack to towards the beginning of the film, whenever when he should go in for the kiss with Amelia. They're sitting in the driveway and she gets out, she goes into her house. And what does he say? I should get up there and kiss her. It'll be something we can tell her kids about someday. I'm going to do that right now. And he drives away. Now that's a really great use of voiceover, right? Because voiceover in film works really well when it's adding something new and it's not simply repeating what we're seeing. And so creating some kind of contrast is really great to invite the audience into the experience, as opposed to just explain to them what they're already seeing. Like, there's a time for that. I'm not trying to be dogmatic here, but it's so much more interesting and fun when you're doing something that conflicts, so that you're inviting the audience to engage with the film, not simply be so passive, because that moment makes you either laugh or makes you a little sad, maybe both. You kind of laugh at first and you're like, oh, that's really sad that he's not going to go after this thing that wants him back, by the way.
Yeah.
Wow. You're walking away from something that you want that also wants you. That's the worst kind of failure that anyone could ever put upon themselves.
I did not laugh.
It was heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking. Yes.
The other thing, and this is very sly, that he does, that he is kind of avoiding, but Robert McKee, they're at the bar, all right? And he's like, whatever you do, do not use an effing Deus Ex Machina, right? And then, of course, at the very end of the film, the gator comes out of nowhere at the most opportune time and kills Laroche right before Laroche kills Charlie.
Yes.
Like that is to a T a Deus Ex Machina. And what happens though, again, it's about the execution because it doesn't feel cheap. The reason it doesn't feel cheap is because throughout the film, we're seeing gators nearby. Like the very first time we're in the swamp, every time we go into the swamp, we're seeing gators and they're nearby us in the swamp. And so it's keeping them around in order to make it feel less like a Deus Ex Machina in the end. And it's just a really clever way to, again, use a trope that doesn't feel cheap, but that most writers make feel cheap because they don't really execute it, in a way that feels honest and to some degree or another earned or logical. Instead,
we see them enough for it to feel like a loaded gun.
Yes.
And it's got to go off.
It's got to go off.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's the perfect way to say it. In that case, I'll move on. And so that's great.
Upend you. I love this. This is great.
The other thing that he does that he's kind of kicking against at the beginning of the film is character growth. Right? He's very hesitant to talk about how a character grows and changes and becomes something different. Charlie, throughout the film, is struggling to adapt himself, right? To change in any way in order to get what he wants, to get the girl, to complete the screenplay, or even to meet the author. Like there's so many things that he's trying to get himself to do that he just can't do. But ultimately, by the end of the film, he does them all. And it's because of the moment that he also doesn't want, like a clarifying moment of realization. And he gets that from himself, from his twin brother, right? Who tells him, he's telling that story about like, you're oblivious to the way people look at you and treat you. He's like, I'm not oblivious. And he's like, yeah, you are. And he tells him that story about the girl in the library that was being nice and then made fun of him as soon as he turned around. He's like, I knew about that. Why were you so happy? That was my love. You are what you love, not what loves you. Boom, realization. And suddenly his whole life is different. Everything changes after that, right? Charlie finally kisses Amelia, but she's with someone else. And he tells her that he loves her because you are what you love. But guess what? She loves you too. Oh, well, how cool is this? This guy grew, and despite the resistance, the reluctance to write something about someone who grows and learns about life, and here he is, he's executing it, but in a way that feels earned and honest, because all the trials and tribulations felt earned and honest to his character. The things that he was struggling with felt endemic to being Charlie Kaufman, a writer locked up inside his head, who can't, exercise any sense of confidence. And by the end, he has a reason to feel confident again. And it was given to him by his brother. So I don't know. I like that. I like all that. The ending, of course, is him pondering like the use of his voiceover. He's in the car and he's debating like, Robert McKee wouldn't be like that, but how else can I show his thoughts? And then of course we see him drive off while literally watching flowers grow and bloom, which is a visual representation of Charlie himself blooming and growing, and responding to life and the cycles of life. Yeah. It's a wonderful little film, Todd. I don't care what you say, man.
It's brilliant. I mean, this is a real book.
Yeah. Susan Orlean is a real person.
Susan Orlean is a real person who wrote a real book that is called The Orchid Thief, about a real guy named John Laroche that Charlie Kaufman wrote a screenplay about. I mean, this is how freaking cool is that? And she's actually in it. Susan Orlean makes a cameo in it. She's, I think, the waitress in the film. Yeah, there's like a scene where they're in the diner and she plays the waitress in the diner.
Oh, in the same scene with Judy Greer?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
So it's life imitating art, imitating life. I mean, yes, to like a T. And I just love, so this, I had an interesting feeling that kind of made me this week, that kind of made me, or last week, that kind of made me think about this movie. in life, right? Which is why I said life imitating art. We had at my work, my boss, the director of my department left. Her last day was Friday.
She didn't love you anymore.
Yeah, she hated
She
it.
left.
She dumped me. And I went through, like, she's the best boss I've ever had. She's awesome. I just adore her. And I went through like a grieving period, and I was like really mad for a while. And I knew that I know the process that you go through, you know, like where you have, I mean, you're going through it with your grandmother, where you go through all of these steps, all of these stages, right? And I effing hate it. I hate it. I hate that the world can dictate what I'm going to feel for a while, and then the next stage that I'm going to feel, and then I'm going to feel this, and I hate it, and I was fighting it. Like, that's just a tiny example, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then my company laid off some people that I was very angry, And basically it was like they were telling me, you know, take some time to get over it. Like, F you, I'm not going to get over it. You are not going to tell me to get over it, you know? And of course, what happens? Eventually you get over it, or you just move to the next stage, or you do move to the next stage. And there's like a frustration with, I think, in this film that Charlie has, of either Hollywood or just human beings in general like to see growth of a character, like to see, oh, they have an issue with this that they bump up against, and they're doing well, but then this happens, and it's him fighting that, but then it's his human nature actually like coming in and saying, you know what? Okay, that is going to happen. And then that is going to happen. And that is going to happen. And obviously he puts twists on it, and it's his own thing. But this kind of movie makes me think of, if you don't have to go into any kind of creative endeavor trying to reinvent the wheel. You just need to go in with honesty.
Yeah.
If you are real and you're honest about what it is that you know what it is that you want to say and communicate, then it's the whole Philip Glass thing, where your taste kind of has to balance out with what you can execute. You just have to execute to the best of your taste, the ability to your taste, and then do it as best you can. And maybe that will turn into something like Adaptation. Maybe it will turn into something like The Matrix. Maybe it will turn into something, but if you go in with the idea of, I'm going to make something brand new and nobody's ever seen this before, you might not. And is that okay with you? You know, okay. Maybe it turns out to be okay with you, like it is for Charlie here, you know?
Absolutely. And it's such a great job of actually ending up doing the thing that he's trying to do, create a new, you know, a fairly new film. He played with style and structure, and he did it in a way that was honest to himself, but still met some of the audience expectations of what makes for a satisfying story and a thriller. Like, it's really smart, because you can also feel him throughout the film just wrestling with those expectations themselves. Like, this whole film is just about wrestling with the format of storytelling in movies, and the frustration that comes with someone like a Robert McKee or a Sid Field, who gives you a manual on how to do it. Robert McKee's a real person. He's written actual, you know, how to write a screenplay things. And I don't know if I've read any of his work. I read in my early 20s, like a good chunk of Sid Field, maybe the first, I say a good chunk, like maybe 2 or 3 chapters, for I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm good. Like I definitely wanted to know some of those things, but I also didn't want to be beholden to them either. And I would read other people that I greatly respect, that'll be forever 10 times the writer that I'll ever be. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who wrote the first Pirates of the Caribbean film, Aladdin, the cartoon, the original cartoon, National Treasure, another Nicolas Cage film that is fun. Like, that's a really fun movie. It's absolutely absurd, but really, really fun. Like, but they're so big on plot. Like, they are plot centric. Everything is plot, plot, plot. And I'm like, I mean, that's great, but I really love Wong Kar-wai. That's very light on plot, and it's still very meaningful to me. And so I can feel Kaufman just wrestling with all those elements of probably executives telling him, "Here's what we want out of a movie," and then him going off into his corner, writing whatever the hell he wants. And then what's crazy is, in this era, after being John Malkovich, everything he wrote would get bought before anyone read it. It was just an automatic bidding war for the new Kaufman project. And it was like, oh, he's got $1 million, 1.2, 1.5. And it's like, you haven't read it. You don't even know the synopsis yet. And they're just like, we're ready. And so I'm sure at some point that kind of went away, but because Adaptation, probably not the most marketable film. But the cachet of making something like this meant a lot to studios. And I think there's a lot to be said whenever your award season rolls around, to have something to submit to award season and to hobnob with everyone else. Like, yeah, you want to make the new whatever G.I. Joe film, but you also know you're probably not going to be lining up for awards. And so having something that says awards, let's get something, on our resume and show up all these other executives. That means a lot, to that crowd as well, which it should, and I think for a good reason. It propels art forward, and it keeps all of that alive whenever it's just more than just how much money did you make. Instead, it's also like, well, what art did you make that got recognized? Well, if you want that, you know what? You're gonna have to deal with artists. You're gonna have to make art. And so awards, that's why I think, the award season is really actually important to the world, just to be a little dramatic about it, because where else do those stories get told? Where else do we get a Moonlight, getting wide recognition? You need that. We need those stories to get recognition so that more people imbibe it and learn about other ways of thinking and get exposed to new ideas. And so something like Adaptation plays into all of that, because if without it, then we're a little bit less as a society, I think. Yeah.
I totally agree. There's, you look at any kind of art form and you've got to have the Nirvanas, you've got to have the Beatles, you've got to have any kind of artist who's done anything new and different. You've got to have, like, the Kubricks, right? Without them, then it's like not having sci-fi as a form of film, right? That science can then use, right? Like, art informs life in so many ways. That I think that it inspires. Movies like 2001 or Star Trek will forever inspire scientists and nerds alike to think about what the future should be like. And that's just one example, like there are plenty of other examples like this that break down these walls of this, act 1, 2, 3 of a way of writing movies or stories in general, that it has to be that way. It just doesn't have to be that way. And you honestly, if you execute it right, you don't even need to explain why it doesn't have to be that way. You can just do it, like it doesn't have to be the way that everybody expects it to be all the time. Sometimes, you just want a popcorn movie, turn off your brain because you've had a long day. Sure. And to that, when I first saw the clip of the seminar, I thought, wow, what a total jerk. But then when he got to the end of the speech, I thought, he's also right. I'm not a filmmaker. I'm Joe Blow. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I've got a job, maybe 2, and I've broken away to go to a movie theater for 2 hours. And this is all I got. and I've given my money that took me, it took me an hour to make this money, and I'm giving it to you at a box office, and you're going to make me sit there for 2 hours and not give me entertainment. You're going to give me just structureless BS. Okay, that's obviously not the character you've made that movie for. I understand. But there is that character.
Yeah.
That is someone who wants to go watch a movie and be entertained and let go of the world. And, that's why people go watch Taylor Swift, go to a Taylor Swift concert or to a Coldplay concert, because they don't want to think about the world and all the other bullshit that they have to do. They want to just be in that moment. And if you're not guiding them through, so there's truth in that too. There's truth all over the place here, and none of it is wrong. Like, that's the cool part about this movie, is you could walk away thinking, oh man, so yeah, that 3-act kind of thing. Yeah, that's kind of important. Or no, that 3-act kind of thing, that's bullshit. I don't want to follow that at all. And you're right. And it's beautiful and awesome. Just go make something.
Just go make something.
It's so great. Such a great film.
I love that. Dude, awesome. Yeah. What are you going to recommend this week?
Yeah. Okay. So this week I'm going to recommend a short film that I found just randomly on YouTube, going down this short film kind of rabbit hole, called The Neighbor's Window. And I believe I told you about it. I'm not going to share too much, but basically the story is just, there's a family in New York who looks out, and their window faces another building of a couple, and they just kind of watch their life, and things happen. So it's really well done.
Yeah, I watched it this morning and loved it. It won an Oscar for best short live action short film.
Oh
yeah,
that's right. It did. Yeah,
incredible. There is one interesting tie to this film, which is Brian Cox, who plays Robert McKee, is in a HBO show called Succession, and one of the neighbors in the window her name is Juliana Canfield. She's also in Succession. She's so good, and I love seeing her in this because she brought so much life to the film. I mean, she makes the film, and she's great in Succession. Like, it's funny because she plays an assistant to one of the kids, and they're just insufferable jerks all the time, and she has to constantly act like she is unbothered by everything they say, and it's really satisfying to watch her. And so so you were gonna
Oh no, I'm just saying the acting is phenomenal. It's just a basic story, but it's really beautiful, and it ties into like perspective, which I think is super important in today's Instagram society. So yeah, it's a great little short film. I think I forget how long it is. It was like 13 minutes, 20 minutes. I can't remember.
Yeah, something like 18, 20 minutes. But worth it. It settles in pretty quick. Like if you give it 2 or 3 minutes, you're right in there then. It gets really, really good, really fast. I'm going to recommend another Nicolas Cage film. It's a recent film. It's called Pig. He is amazing.
Oh my God.
Did you see it?
Oh yeah.
Dude, he smokes it.
So good.
That's one of very few like stoic roles that he takes on, and he is just fire. He's magnificent. Because as much as some of his other silly works are fun, like Mandy, I'm never watching Mandy again. Like that was weird, and I appreciated the weirdness to some extent, but my God, I'm good on those kind of films.
I still haven't seen it. I haven't brought myself to see it.
It's weird. I mean, I don't know if you smoke, but have a bowl and watch, and you'll enjoy it 10 times more, I promise.
Okay.
Yeah, so Pig. And stay tuned for next week. We are going to look at one of the movies in the box that Todd chooses in the next 10 seconds.
Okay. Just that one.
I knew it. We're gonna take a look at No Country for Old Men. I'm gonna see if I can get my acting coach Trent Moore on the horn with us because he's in this movie. And so it'll be fun to hear him talk about what he learned on set and what it was like working on this. I've been thinking about trying to pull him in for ages now. And so I will see if I can do that. Yeah, No Country for Old Men. Stay tuned for that. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review if there's a movie you want us to cover. And if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/adaptation.
Great. And our quote of the day today is from Charlie Kaufman. There's this inherent screenplay structure that everyone seems to be stuck on, this 3-act thing. It doesn't really interest me. To me, it's kind of like saying, well, when you do a painting, you always need to have sky here, the person here, and the ground here. Well, you don't.
What I love about that is I think he's both right and wrong. I think because I feel completely in agreement whenever I'm starting to work on a story, I don't want to think about what am I doing in the first act? What am I doing in the second act? What am I doing in the third act? That's a terrible way to go about writing a story. And you're just going to end up with a big blob of gray mess. It's like painting in another way. Whereas sometimes you try to make a really cool color and you just end up with this brown gunk. You don't want that either. Instead, what's really useful is to whatever structure your story, however you like, the events that take place, the story you're trying to tell, the moments that you want to hit, whatever, floats your boat. And then at the end, after you've written your story, to be able to analyze it and say, okay, my second act is flailing a little bit. Why is that boring? And just using it as a much more broad analysis tool. That's fun for me and useful just as a way to frame what's happening throughout the film, but not as a way to plan what you're going to do in the film. That feels a little too rote and uninspired. And as much as, sometimes you just need to write a thing to get paid, it's also really good to work from a point of creativity. And it's hard to feel creative whenever you're filling in the blanks. Like, no one wants to do that. Like, I don't know, Todd, if you want to write too much song to your Casio keyboards, built-in tracks, like that's probably not as inspired as like, okay, let me just start fresh and create something here from a riff or a lyric and then build out from there. And if whatever the Casio can help at some point, great. But probably not as your very first starting point. At least that's not how I would want to go about it. Yeah.
Yeah, unless with that, and remember I sent that clip of the Gorillas, no. What was their big hit? The
Feels Good Inc.
I'm happy, I'm feeling glad, I got sunshine. There's a key or like a synthesizer that they use. The first preset has this gung, 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 gung. That's it. That's the song. And they were doing an interview and the guy goes, yeah, listen. And he hits the button and that's the song. I mean, it's obviously not the song. You need the lyrics, you need the singing and all that stuff, but it's just so funny.
Yeah.
Like sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. It's the exception that proves the rule. The thing is, that stands out because no one does that.
Exactly.
That's why you say the exception that proves the rule. It's because the exception is the one that stands out, not the one that everyone else is doing. And
I know what you're saying.
Absolutely,
I just thought that was funny.
But that is hilarious. I wonder how many of their songs are like, something like a doorbell. This is a great doorbell.
Probably. I heard one thing about Michael Jackson for Beat It. They were looking for 3 weeks for a snare sound.
Oh my God.
3 weeks for just the snare sound. And then what happened was that someone had put a screwdriver on top of a shelf and while they were like messing around or something, the screwdriver fell off the shelf and hit a drum case. And Michael stopped. He said, "That's it. What happened? What was that? That's the snare sound." And that's what it was. It was a screwdriver that fell on a snare drum case.
Oh,
and that's what you hear.
Well, from now on, I'm dropping tools everywhere.
As you should.
As you should. Nice. Well, now we're going to listen to a new track from Mad Valley. It's called Come Back Down. Really excited about this, buddy. What, anything you want to say before we hit play?
This was one of the first songs that I wrote, for the record, well, that I wrote when I came back to writing music in general. I sat down to write a bunch of songs for a library, and this one came out really quickly, actually. And it was funny because I played the piano part, and then I thought, okay, what does this make me feel like? And then I thought of my friend. It's about one friend of mine who passed away, that I grew up with on his street. We were like best friends, and I would go down to his house all the time and everything. And then, and I thought, okay, I've thought about this guy for a long time, but is that really, do I have anything in me anymore to write about something like that? Because, when, I don't know, when you get older, I think things change, like your perspective on things change. And, maybe you're not as passionate about emotions sometimes, or about not emotions in general, but just certain things. And then this thing just fell out in like 20 minutes. I wrote almost all of it. I think within 30 minutes, the entire thing was done. And it was really cool because I don't even really remember writing it. It was one of those things where, oh, there's the song. Okay, done. And the song sounded completely different when I was writing the lyrics. So now that it turned into what it is, it just feels like it always was. And I don't have a lot of songs like that. And this is the most visual song that I have, I think, on the record for me. And I'm working on a little video for it. I don't know. I'm still working on it.
Okay.
It's not completely like right, but I think at some point I might just say F it and put it out, because why not?
Yep.
But yeah, that's where it's at. So
nice. Let's take a listen.
All right.
On the corner where you lived, we played all afternoon. I grew up there, so unaware. It's boarded up now, every memory locked away. I'm not that old, am I this old? Just left the room. You're not that old. You should be old. Ooh, the rain won't wash away all the things we do today. From the moment that you left, I imagined where you'd be. The sky went black, you can't come back. And she followed you there, like an anchor left ashore. Now I'm not young, you're always young. All
Dude, I don't know. Suddenly the guitar was there. I didn't realize whenever it entered, it probably entered really early in the song, but I just suddenly realized it as it hits the little solo towards the end. I was like, oh man, yeah, there's a guitar right there. And it's slaying. Like, it's so good. Don't know
in
when
that
came
second
in.
part, you mean?
Yeah.
In that second? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Like after the bridge. And the bridge itself, ooh, I mean, I assume that's what you call that one. I loved it. It gave me these really strong, like late 90s, early 2000s flashbacks. It just had this really, I don't know the right word for it, but the melody of it, the texture of your voice, and the way it's layered in all felt very like a memory in that way, I guess. Yeah.
It's awesome.
What are some of the things you're doing in here?
Well, it's kind of like an homage to my friend, wishing that he had been able to grow up, obviously, and then and get old, and so it was like I felt like I needed it to be kind of emotional at the beginning, but there's two parts to everything, and so I thought, well, how do I make this important and not just like somber completely, and I was on a bike. I won't forget it. I was on a bike ride one day before I was working on the lyrics, just the music. I was on a bike ride and I thought, oh, what if I pulled like do you remember The Suburbs by Arcade Fire?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What there's a song in The Suburbs where they do this whole thing where the song just stops and then it comes back in at like double the speed. And I thought, oh, why don't I just do something like that? And so I just did that. That was it. I was like,
awesome.
oh, okay, yeah, this totally works. And you should have heard it the first time I did it. It was still really slow. I didn't realize that, oh man, I need to like really bump the pace. So when I wrote it, the second part was actually pretty like really slow. So then when I just kept speeding it up as I was working on it, like, oh, the second part needs to be faster. No, it still needs to be faster, still needs to be faster. And it still probably could be faster, but that's just what I settled on. And then the out of the entire record, I think I'm mostly proud of those lyrics at the end. In that, I guess, that last part, I want to wake you up, future at your bedside, show you what it feels like to get grilled. I for some reason that just like fell out and it just felt so right and unencumbered by any other feeling outside of what I was feeling in that moment. And it defined the whole song, and it just felt really right. And then to repeat that at the end, take care of today. Like I thought at some point, maybe I should say something else. And I remember I just wrote it out a bunch of times and I recorded it that way. And I said, I'll come back to this. I don't want to repeat this this many times. I'll come back to this. And I just never did because sometimes I'm lazy, but it turned out to be the right call to me because in music, when you repeat a line, it has to have weight and importance. So you have to have a reason for saying something more than once, the same thing more than once. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I want to say that a bunch of times because I'm trying to remind myself that, not for anybody else, but for myself, like, take care of that. Not everybody gets that today, meaning today. Take care of it. Take care of it. Take care of it. Because it's so easy to forget to. So yeah, I think I'm probably it's probably one of the songs that I'm most proud of on the record for sure.
Wow. Yeah. There's a Macbeth quote, right? Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle.
How appropriate.
Yesterday's whatever.
It's okay.
Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, my mind completely.
I know where it went. It's very appropriate. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. That's a great song. I'm curious, I'd love to see the finished video, and I think that's going to be beautiful, man. I'm excited about it.
Thanks, man. It's just me and my son. And I told him to get, I woke his butt up at 5:30 in the morning. We went up to my mountain right next to my house and we just shot this thing, man. It was, because I had this idea and I talked to you about it. We wanted to do it and it didn't happen because I wasn't able to go to Austin when I wanted to in September because of COVID. But I just thought, you know what? I have to make something. And if I need to be the example that I tell everybody on this podcast of just make stuff. So it's just me and him. That's literally it. It's awesome. No other hands in this at all. Yeah. And if it turns out to be shit, it's all my fault. If it turns out to be good, it's all our fault. You know, it's like my son killed it. He just killed it. Everything I asked him to do, he did, and he just nailed it. And I'm like, man, you're 10? Jeez. So yeah, a lot of fun. We'll see how it turns out.
That's dope. Yeah, look for links in the show. Check out all of his other songs as well if you've missed those, and we'll have links to all of that in the show notes. Yeah, man.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and Wes for giving me the platform to listen to my song. Hopefully you guys enjoyed how we pulled apart Adaptation. I loved this film. I think we both did. So great. Some really good things to follow. Join us next week. We're doing No Country for Old Men. Very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, same.
Please subscribe, review us, and if there's anything you'd like to see us cover, let us know. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.